Hello, my name is Daniel Spies, and you're listening to the Evolve Podcast. Evolve is a podcast aimed to help you evolve into the person you desire to become. By diving deep, we can extract practical insights, dispel bad information, and move forward with tangible actions to better our lives.
Do you like to learn about random, wild stuff? You know, the things you didn't think you needed to know about, then realized you should? Then welcome to Nothing Off Limits, the podcast that gives you one place to go for something different. Impress your next party guest with your unusual body of knowledge. And if you dig the show, get more information at ladyfoxentertainment.com and subscribe, rate, or review. Thanks. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Nothing Off Limits. You know, recently, a friend of mine texted me and was like, hey, do you know your Myers-Briggs type? And I was like, I think I do. I don't know. I think it has a J in it or something, but I couldn't remember. So I went online. I took the free test. It takes like 10 minutes, and I found out what my type was, which, by the way, is the same as Oprah's. Woot, woot. But anyway, I started to dig deeper. I started to notice that people use their Myers-Briggs type on their dating profiles, not only for new jobs, but I mean, all kinds of situations. So I found today's guest through my research, and I'm so excited to have him on the show. His name is Daniel Spies. Daniel's a dating and relationship coach. He focuses on intimacy and communication. He uses results-based coaching and the use of MBTIs as he helps both singles and couples bring personal awareness and accountability to their world of romance. You can find him on YouTube. He's got a ton of content. That's actually where I found him. Instagram, and on his website, danielspiescoaching.as.me. I'm going to put all of these links in the show notes so that you can connect with him online. No further ado. Welcome, Daniel.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Let's teach people something. I want to learn something too.
Sure.
So let's start with you. Tell us more about your coaching and how you got into specifically the Myers-Briggs piece of it.
To be honest, I got into Myers-Briggs and psychology at a really young age. I kind of just grew up in an environment where I needed to understand everything, and that just kind of carried over into my adult life. I would say somewhere around my pre-college years, I was just kind of I wanted to know what I wanted to do. And I know I just didn't want to be a regular psychologist. I didn't want to have an office. I wanted to have kind of like a free workflow kind of environment, and I just didn't know where to put myself. And then I just Google searched the word intuition one day, because I thought to myself, I'm like, hey, I'm kind of intuitive, like I just want to look this up. And then one thing led to another. I managed to get onto the MBTI Wikipedia. And then from there, I just, research ahoy, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's funny how that happens. It happens to me too, especially on LinkedIn. Like I'll go to look for someone, and then I go down the rabbit hole of LinkedIn.
The rabbit hole of knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. It's hard. You have to refocus yourself, but it's actually awesome as well, because that led you to doing what you do, which is pretty cool.
I definitely love it.
All right. So tell us more. What is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and why is it important for us to even be talking about this?
So I think the MBTI and other related theories like it are important, because it brings about one thing that a lot of people need in the beginning stages of whether you're going to be in a relationship, whether you're going to be dating, whether it's a work environment or career choices, whatever. There's a lot of utility based things you can use it for. It's personal awareness is probably one of the biggest things for me while utilizing it. I don't normally use it like in the later stages of working with somebody, but in the awareness stage of what you're working with, strengths and weaknesses of your personality temperaments, what you're used to doing, what are your, what you value, what your desires are, what you usually do, how you usually think. These are all really important things when, you're approaching the dating and relationship atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Not just even considering it, in terms of your life balance, right? What's healthy for you versus what's healthy for somebody else, how you get energy versus how somebody else gets energy. It kind of really dives deep in some ways.
So can't I just read my horoscope?
You could, but it's not based. I mean, I like horoscopes, in terms of just, oh, cool, I'm an Aries, but aside from that, I know there's really no correlating, I guess, facts that go with it. Whereas MBTI, there's everybody's different, right? But the way that I see MBTI, you can use it as a loose way of kind of seeing the direction in which someone operates their life. And I see it in more of an operation sense. There are people who are trying to legitimize and validate, and that's a whole nother conversation. But there are some correlations with certain types, and off the drop of maybe 10 questions of talking to somebody, I can narrow it down pretty quickly, I guess.
So it's scientific in its approach, is what you're saying? Is like,
yeah, like I think one of the biggest misconceptions of MBTI is that it's about personality, but the personality, the type, quote unquote, is actually shorthand for functionality, and there's no such thing as personality in MBTI, because it's all based off of your function, your main ways of thinking, not who you are as a person. Right? And there are other theories for those kinds of approaches, but for MBTI, it's actually just strictly, how does your functionality correlate with your everyday life? What I've seen.
Yeah, I'm getting more and more aware of my own functioning as I grow older.
I think we all are.
So how do you break it down? Because I know when I got my final result, it was 4 letters. And for people who have never seen this before, who are listening to this, they're like, what the hell is this? Yeah. Can you just break it down into these 4 functions as you're talking about?
Yeah. So there's going to be 4 letters, I think, that typically everybody's going to see. You're going to see the E or the I for the extroverted or introversion. That's just if you're outgoing or you're not outgoing. Again, it's nothing's bad here, right? It's just how you are. Then you have the S or N, which is sensing or intuition. Then you have thinking or feeling, which is the T or the F. And then you have the J or the P, which is the judging or the perceiving. These are like on the surface. This is like an on the surface acronym of how somebody is typically going to be, right? Underneath this acronym of 4 letters, you're going to have 8 functions. And I know that's probably a lot to swallow, so just bear with me. But there's
under each letter?
Not under each letter, just in general. It's something called the cognitive functions. And so when you dive deeper into MBTI, there's 8 functions. There's the 4, right? There's sensing, thinking, feeling, and intuition. And they all have an augmented introversion or extroversion version of the one function. So you can either be an introverted intuitor or an extroverted intuitor.
Interesting. So it gets super psychology-y.
Right. And so I guess a way to see it is, if you're an ENFJ like Oprah, right, you're getting the wisdom from within, versus me, who's an ENFP. I'm getting the wisdom from collected data of patterns from the outside world. So, yeah.
Can they change? Can you evolve as a person, or are they set in stone?
They're set in stone. And the best way that I'd like to give an example of it is if anybody's ever illegally downloaded programs off of LimeWire or downloaded anything sequentially, right? If you imagine your 3 or 4 first functions, right? So we'll just take your example, because you're an ENFJ, right? I believe you said. So,
yeah.
Right. So your first function is extroverted feeling, right? Your second function is introverted intuition. Your third function is extroverted sensing, and then introverted thinking. So what that's going to look like, right, is we all focus on the first 3 functions, and then the 4th one goes dormant, right? And so what happens sequentially as we get older, we start off using the first 2, right, interchangeably, and we start using the first 3, and then I guess later in life, maybe 40s, 50s, you may not even develop these functions because it really depends on who you are as a person. But eventually, you get to learn how to utilize most of the functions that you have, because you have 8 functions that most of them you don't even see in the light of day, right? So you only operate with some that you really value. So the idea is that you learn to coexist with life with the first 3, and then interchangeably the other ones, you can kind of, get a sense for how it operates in your life. So you can say my 4th function is, introverted sensing. And so sometimes I'll catch myself looking through, photographs of the past and reminiscing on the past sometimes. And it's very seldom. It doesn't happen too often, but it's kind of not really in my mental existence. It's kind of on the border. And so everybody kind of has these kinds of functions that express in life in different ways, right? Some people may have, extroverted sensing as their fourth function down the row of 8, and it's just out of the cusp again. And so you may not be very alert and observant in your environment, right? You might be one of those people who's an INFJ, who's an introverted version of yourself, actually, who is just all spaced out, thinking in their head in the clouds, right? Not really aware. And so,
I know a lot of those kinds of people.
Yeah, and
space cadets.
And there's all different kinds of space cadets, and I think that's the beauty of it all. It's all very flexible. It's all very dynamic.
But your type can't change, so it's set in stone, and that's it. But that final letter might fluctuate as you age. Is that what you're saying?
So every type of the 16 has 8 that goes technically in order, quote unquote, right? And so not everybody's going to meet the norm. I believe everybody's an outlier and functions in different ways. Technically an ENFJ has 8 functions that go in a particular order, right? As much as every other type will. And the first 3 everybody should focus on, or the first 4 maybe, and just kind of think about how you operate with the rest of them, right? And you can look that up. You can Google cognitive functions and get more info on that stuff.
Yeah, I'm already getting lost. Yeah. I'm like, what? 8, this, 16, what? All I care about are like those 4 letters,
right.
And so can you tell us more, like just focusing on these like final types, right? So if somebody that's out there listening goes online, takes this 10, 15 minute test, whatever it takes them to get it done, and they get their final type, if you could give us the most common types, like the general population, what you found in your research, and what kind of people they are based on this test. I think that would be interesting.
The majority of the population as it stands right now are sensors. They're going to be people who are focused on the external environment, less on the intuitive, more underneath the surface environments or context. If you look at the world that we live in today, who
selfies.
Builds the world? Yeah, who builds the world and who runs it, right? And who is going to be the salesmen and who's going to be the executives, who's going to be the plumbers and the firefighters, right? All these kind of translate in some way, shape, or form to, what MBTI type they're, and they usually will correlate. People who are usually more hands-on are going to be sensors. Sometimes, there's outliers, obviously, but more often than not, you can see that there are correlations with job functions and careers with people's MBTI, and it really goes based off of what makes you happy, what's purposeful to you, and what comes off really easy.
It fascinates me that they could get the functionalities, right, of what you'd be good at with your job, how you operate in relationships, how you process information, all of that kind of stuff by just a small set of questions. How the hell did they choose what questions to ask and know that this was going to give them the right data? Like, that just seems crazy to me.
Hey, listen, it's a good question that I would ask myself as well. I don't have the answer to that, but the way that I would see it is, every question they ask is geared towards maybe a particular area of a function, right?
So give us an example.
All right. Well, let's say, I guess a question I can ask you, right, is if I was trying to see if you were an ENFJ, which you are, but let's just say we don't know, right? I can ask you, how do you typically operate in your environment? Are you trying to put a particular energy out into your environment in terms of feelings? Or are you trying to just kind of perceive your environment in a way that doesn't change it, right? Are you looking to change the environment? Are you looking with your feelings, or are you looking to leave it be, right? Or you can say, would you rather express your feelings, or do you see yourself not wanting to express your feelings because you don't think feelings should be expressed?
I definitely express my feelings.
Yeah.
At all times.
Typically, the big difference between people who favor extroverted feeling, which is what you prefer, and introverted feeling, which is what I prefer, is that I don't really believe that feeling should be expressed fundamentally. I believe that there's a magic behind just two people not needing to express it versus, someone like yourself who would want to express that, because then that's being put into the environment. People are knowing how to communicate better with you, right? You're creating like a synapse with the world, right? And so,
well, I was just going to say this is like a perfect segue to talking about how you bring different types together into not just work environments to see if two people could function well at work and be complementary to each other, but also in dating, which is primarily what I want to focus on here. Can you give us some examples of what works best together? Because if I'm an expressive person and I need to, talk about what I'm feeling, but I'm dating or working with somebody who doesn't express, that's going to frustrate the shit out of me.
Right. And so the way that I see how types can go hand in hand or not go hand in hand is you have to remember that anything can work. I don't believe that any type coupling is always going to be the best match, because it's up to that person to explore what works best for them in a healthy, balanced way. Maybe by the book type couplings might not work for one person, the other it will, right? Sometimes it can be complementary. Like you could say that an opposite pairing for you could be an ISTP, which is your functions, right? But reversed from 8 to 1. And so not from 8 to 1. So like your fourth function, right, which is, it should be, introverted thinking. The ISTP's first function is that. And so what you would see in that kind of relationship is like opposites in the first four. And so how you normally operate within the world is how he would operate less in the world, as a kind of crutch, as a really hard point to do, because that would mean his extroverted feeling is his last function. And so what you have there is a complementary of, what I suck in, he's great at, and what he's great at,
There just could be good. That's like yin and yang.
It is. And so there's different kinds of ways that types within this theory can coexist like that. There's different kinds of ways that types operate with one another. But the main point, I guess I would say, is not all types, not all these kinds of really beautiful connections, like in terms of type to type, will work for everybody. Everybody has different desires and preferences, and maybe the next ENFJ I talk to says, what, I don't want, a partner of mine to communicate. I like the fact that there is some mystery because it keeps me thinking.
Right. So there are variables. Like just because you got your final type doesn't mean that that's set in stone.
Right. Now, it's a good starting point, though. You can say to yourself, great, now I know I'm an ENFJ. Let me go see the different types that are within my value set, right? INFPs, ENFPs, INFJs. And then let me go explore ones that have the same functions that I share, but are in different value quadrants, right? Like the ISTP, the ESTP, the INTJ, right? And so you get to explore. Once you start mapping yourself on here and mapping others, you may be able to kind of make better decisions going forward. And that's the whole idea. It's to get progress.
So I find it interesting. A lot of people are listing their MBTI on their dating profile. And so if you do a little research as to like which types are best matches for you after you get your own type, then you can just pass up that profile where you're like, ooh, I know we're not going to get along. Or in your opinion, do you think you should give it a chance?
Listen, you can always give it a chance. Like that's my golden rule. Like I just mentioned, any type can get along, and you don't know per se until you open that box, right? Which is that person. In my experience, like I'm not gonna lie, I have a Bumble profile and I'm still dating. And I have it right at the first acronym right on my profile. I'm an ENFP,
Yeah.
If somebody's serious and they look up the profile, they'll more or less kind of get a glimpse of who I am. But that's not going to be totally who I am, because I am my own person and I have my own life and I'm more than my thoughts, right?
So like on the first date with someone, you're like, all right, I need you to take this test and come back and report to me.
No, I mean, listen, there's got to be free flow to it. It's a good conversation starter. It's nice to know that if somebody's also equally like, oh, cool, like, what is that? And like, how are you? And, you bring it up, like, that's great. You don't want to get too crazy with this stuff, right? In terms of because again, it's just a small portion. It's more
it's a guideline.
It's a really good guideline. It's a really good compatibility factor. And it's a really good, I guess, tool, like once you're actually in a relationship, to kind of really work with the person you're with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you would be with that person technically for a long time at that point.
Yeah.
But it's just a good guideline in the beginning. It's okay, cool. Like, this is who I am. This is who you are. And like, let's just see if it works, you know?
Yeah. And it helps you get like a little insight so you can understand why somebody might be doing something or acting a certain way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's like if you're an extrovert like me and you're not getting an answer, like my tendency is to be like, what the hell just happened? Like, why am I not getting a response about this? But if you know that person's type and you know, oh, okay, they're processing, it's going to take them a minute to like get to a point where they're ready to communicate.
Yeah.
Then
correct.
it's easier to deal with and to understand and to, and then I can go back to whatever I was doing and not worry about it.
Absolutely. And that's the way that I use MBTI, if I even do so. And in my coaching, it's strictly for communication and building intimacy and showing and really skill building with who I'm working with, because the more the person knows about themselves and about others, the easier bridging these communication barriers is going to be.
Totally. I mean, I have to say, I think companies who make you take one of these it's good. If you know what your team is all about and the makeup of your team, then it helps with communications on projects or whatever you're doing with clients.
Yeah.
So I have a question. What if two people are the same exact type? Is there going to be like butting of heads, locking of horns, zero growth potential? Is it just going to be ugly?
It really depends on the person, but what I would say is it's actually going to be not that. It's actually going to be a positive experience for the most part. If you have two people who are in a balanced place who prefer the same type, let's just say ENFJ and ENFJ, you're going to get a lot of the same frequency. This person, two people thinking very similarly, but maybe slightly different ways. But what you will have are people who also have the same challenges, right? Communication, whether it be in life, whether it be in taking care of themselves, they're going to kind of have the same, difficulties. And it may work and it may not work. And you may just say, hey, like, we both struggle in the same way, but we're gonna make it work. Or you might say, I need somebody who can complement me in X, Y, and Z ways.
Right.
It happens a lot. There's a lot of, when you have two types that that are the same, you have familiarity, and a lot of people like familiar and a lot of people like, the exact opposite.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, I like growth, and I feel like relationships are meant to teach you something and to kind of put a mirror on yourself in a way where it's like you see more about how you are behaving when somebody's different from you,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
correct.
my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here Googling famous ENFJs, and Johnny Depp is one.
I honestly think he's an INFP. I think
Really?
Yeah, I think he's an INFP. He's an actor type. He's definitely got that artsy vibe. A lot of INFPs correlate with being artsy.
What about Bono? He's listed too.
I don't know. He might be an ENFJ. I think he's more because he's more about expressing, right? He's a singer.
Yeah.
He's putting his vibes out into the world.
Well, Johnny Depp is expressive through his acting.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, even if you're an introvert, you can still express, right? Like the quadrant of intuitive feelers in general, the NFs, the NF quadrant, right? They all actually are very, they correlate a lot with actors. ENFP could be an actor. I could have been an actor. It just, it didn't fit me at the time, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could still do it later on.
Yeah. We all fall under that option to be actors, I guess. The musicians,
So are there situations that come into your office, like when you're coaching your clients, where after knowing the MBTIs, you're like, this is not going to work out? Or are you still kind of keeping that open mind that there are outliers and that this may be able to be worked out?
In terms of working with somebody?
Yeah. Let's say it's a couple.
So what I would do then is, I like to keep a lot of transparency when I work with couples. If there's something that they should know that I notice, then that's a perception that they're owed, right? Because they're coming to me
Mm-hmm.
for clarity, and part of clarity comes with new information. And so if I'm noticing something that, hey, you're bringing this to the table, you're bringing that to the table, and this is how that energy is looking from the outside,
Yeah.
it may give them a different way of seeing things, and
Yeah.
that's why I coach, is to bring a different way of seeing things to somebody else.
Yeah. Do you have an example or like a case study, keeping your client anonymous, of course, of like a situation where they were butting heads about something, typical couple stuff, whether it's money or sex or career choices, whatever. And you used the MBTIs and gave them awareness of the way that they're functioning and approaching this problem to help them work through it.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of dudes, go figure, right? And
At least you're not a pickup artist.
No, yeah, I don't believe in that practice. It's for some people, not for me. But there's this one guy I worked with, and he was trying to get out of the friend zone, which is a hard place to get out of. And his type was INFP, which is pretty much the epitome of the guitarist, the serenader, like very soft, very gentle kind of guy, very artsy. And he was trying to, make moves on this best friend of his. And, what in his personality type, he's pretty much not really about making moves and creating actions and being a certain kind of way that would provoke that, right? Because some types are more prone to creating conflict in different ways, positive, negative, just in terms of actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like somebody like an ESTP is like an aggressor type, just all about, conflict and challenge. And so,
I've dated some of those.
Yeah. And so I had told this young man, I said, the best way to get out of the friend zone in which you're at, based off of kind of how you are, not necessarily about MBTI, but just him in general, you have to ask yourself how your normal mode of being is around her versus how somebody who likes her and is with her is going to be, right? Because if you like somebody and if the other person knows that you like them, and you're just going to be a different kind of way, right?
Yeah.
That opens up the can of worms, right?
Mm-hmm.
That a different kind of dynamic versus the dynamic of friends. And I said, don't be friends around her, right? And I'm like, just subtly, just start changing, right, in a way that's not going to obviously offset everything, but be a little romantic. I know it's, this guy's a total romantic. I'm like, just be the romantic that you want to be, and pretend that there's a bridge that will connect you to the other side, but you got to build that bridge as you go.
Mm-hmm.
He did. He ended up making like this I told him, it wouldn't be a bad idea to create like a very dramatic, surprising gesture, and like, bring her somewhere and just like kiss her or do your own thing, but just surprise her with some kind of affection. And that kind of just finished the bridge in his little story. And now they've been together ever since.
That's nice. I love that fairy tale ending. What can people do, though, in this situation, since we're talking about somebody who's been friend zoned, and let's say the other person is like, no, thanks, I enjoy being your friend. Like, you have to also, I imagine, you coach your clients to like not go in with the expectation that they're going to win.
Right. Yeah. And so what I like to, the perception or the philosophy that I go in with myself and with my clients, because I personally believe in this philosophy, is, you can't control the world. You can only control yourself, and you have to navigate with your best interests. And so if you like somebody, whether you're a guy or a girl, and you get a rejection letter, it's totally fine. We just got to move on. And so you have to ask yourself, is it worth this much to be friends with this person, or should I put my energy and time into actually finding that person?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't too long ago that I actually told somebody, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just not interested in being friends right now. I'm looking, right?
Yeah.
There's just a general kind of like, oh, okay. And, it's, You move
Yeah, that's
on.
like vag blocking. Like
Yeah.
if you have someone around you, like I used to always say, like my guy friends, like they're cock blocking me
Yeah.
unintentionally, just by being around. Like people assumed that it was my boyfriend or whatever.
Right.
And so I understand your stance on that. It should be like, yeah, let's just chill that out because I want to be made available and I got to get you out of my way.
Yeah. And it's just, you owe it to yourself, whether you're a guy or a girl, to not have your time wasted, and to realize
Yeah.
the environment, the social environment that you're creating for yourself, because your social environment is a direct reflection of how you are being, right? And if you're an ENFJ surrounded by guys, which is very typical, that could be a common issue that you have.
Yes, it is.
Everybody. Yeah.
That's funny that that's a common thing because I didn't know that. And I was thinking, I was like, I do tend to have a lot of guy friends.
You should create a segment that is literally called Now You Know, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to change that. But yeah, what the hell? Now that all makes sense. So tell us more about, like, have you ever, I know you work with a lot of dudes, but have you ever worked with a couple that came to you and was like, we're hitting a roadblock here. We need you, Daniel.
Yeah. And so I don't just integrate, MBTI and theories in my practice. I kind of take from a whole bunch of different things that I think are really relevant. But yeah, sometimes I work with couples and they come with me mostly for communication problems, and mostly it's kind of unfortunate. People tend to seek out help when it's kind of like too late.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can bring it back to life. It's not your response. It's not my responsibility to bring it back to life, but it's my responsibility to just kind of show them where they are and like, all right, cool. Well, you brought me this bag of whatever this is, and now this is what that is outside the bag, right? And sometimes you don't have the best story. Sometimes you have people who realize that it's over, and they needed somebody to really kind of show them that it was over.
Yeah.
Right.
So at what point in your relationship do you recommend people start therapy?
Honestly,
like first date, like, hey, let's go to the therapist.
honestly, I just believe in preventative. If you're going to go to your doctor once a year to make sure everything's good and you get your scans and you get your tests, why wouldn't you want to go to, a coach or not, maybe a therapist, maybe a counselor, and just make sure that all the checks are checked off? Like, why not?
Yeah.
Have an intermediary actually kind of go through with you and audit, because a lot of my job is kind of just auditing in that sense and making sure that, okay, just to make sure, so you guys know, like, everything's pretty much checked off except this one little thing here at the bottom, and we should probably talk about that.
That's pretty empowering because then you sort of know it off the bat and then you can decide if you still want to dive in and work through that or not.
Yeah.
So are there certain types that are just like automatically more sexually attracted versus, having an intellectual connection? I imagine that all starts to go back to all those functionality pieces.
It does. And some types are drawn more than others to, in general, I think people are attracted to others who are more intellectual. We can get into correlations all day, but I believe that everybody, again, is going to be different, and not every type is going to be the same. They're probably going to be, we'll just say this, for example, there can be every ENFJ in the world, like yourself, that span across different IQ, intelligent quotients, right? So you can have an ENFJ, an IQ of 90 or 80 or 70 or 140 or 150, or that one Neil deGrasse Tyson dude who's an ENFJ, but he's a scientist, and he's really, really smart, but he likes science. And so, it's going to differ, depending on the person, depending on what they like.
Yeah. Well, I think the lack of awareness in that is going to make you continue to go through patterns where it's like you're going to constantly attract the same type and you're not going to understand why it's not working out. And I think that's where I've been. And so now whoever I date needs to take this fucking test.
Hey, listen, just start off with the first 3 or 4 pairings that make the most sense.
Yeah.
Go from there. That's
why sorry, man.
start off with the basics, don't start off with exact opposites and people in quadrants that don't have similar values. That's where people really start to get, butt heads.
Yeah.
And when you're butting head with somebody, odds are they're not they're not in like the same value quadrant as you. They're not going to be a type that sees eye to eye in anything. We're always going to have those people in our lives, But at the end of the day, it's about the communication. Again, they're probably going to be really best friends, maybe, if that.
Mm-hmm.
Want to seek out what's relevant to you, and that's just instinct as it has been. You want to be around people and be with others who can connect and vibe with you and build and have like a really strong just communication from the get-go.
Yeah. Or be willing to accept like things that you do that may be opposite of what they would do. Because I have friends in my life who get pissed that I do certain things and they don't understand why I've done it or that I haven't done enough or whatever. And that gets on my nerves because I'm like, are you kidding me?
And
I'm not going to do everything that you expect me to do. Like I'm my own person.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating, especially when you have a majority of population of a population that doesn't know how to express and translate the communication, right? And that's the biggest issue. Mm-hmm. And in my interpersonal friendships and relationships, I tend to have no issues with that because I can normally kind of coin it in a way that kind of translates and gets most of the content over what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because, everybody has different keywords that they use in their head and different experiences. So it's nice to know these things so that way you can communicate better in general.
Totally. Yeah. I think the whole like world right now is becoming more conscious and willing to understanding the importance of communication, and whoever's not is going to struggle. And so I love this kind of stuff because it's just one more tool in the arsenal of living on this planet.
It's the biggest thing when I run to people like on the street, I go, okay, cool. Like, when we kind of talk up a conversation, whether it's a friend or a coworker or somebody, I'll go, okay, cool. If you want to start dating somebody, personality theory, MBTI, the 5 love languages, it's like basic stuff. And then from there, like, it just gives so much off the bat to the other person. Like, oh, wow, like this is what this person needs to feel loved. And this is how this person communicates. And this is how they think. What else more do you need? Like, and if people just have those starting building blocks, then they're way better off long-term wise than anything else. Statistically, I think I was reading a study the other day where we're getting so much more research-based as not just millennials, but in general, people are getting more research-based, not just for buying cars and purchasing different items, but with their dating life as well. And with opportunity comes research and making sure that when you finally do make a choice, that it's the choice that people want. And so we're like most people now in dating are in research mode, given the technology, right? And it's very interesting how people are going about it. But I think people could go about it way more efficiently if they knew what they were researching and knew what was best for them.
Yeah. Stop wasting your time, people.
Stop swiping and swipe more intelligently.
I like that. So if somebody doesn't have a Myers-Briggs type on their profile, but you're attracted to them, give it a whirl and see what happens. But don't waste too much time. If you start butting heads on things, if you start seeing that there's no matchup in values, I mean, at that point, it might be pretty obvious that it's time to take the test.
Yeah.
I've had guys in the past who would totally resist taking the love languages test.
Really?
And and it really bothered me because I was like, aren't you curious about this? Like we express differently, like clearly, like we already started to notice that it wasn't working. And I was like, I think this will help us. No, I'm not doing that.
Honestly, it's a good showcase of how vested they are, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how I see it. I mean, if, I would say relationship growth is a really important factor of relationships. Like you're your own person, the other person is their own person, and you're building this thing together. And it's like, would you like strong lumber for the house you're building, or do you want twigs to build your house?
Right.
And some people, I guess, just don't know how, or have never learned how to, actually progress within a relationship.
Yeah.
Just exist. Nobody wants to just exist.
And people need to understand how much hard work is involved in building a relationship. I mean, it's not just about knowing your type indicator or taking the love languages test or whatever. It goes beyond that because, like you said, there are all these variables that come into play, and so it takes work and effort. And so, if you really want it, then you should be willing to do what it takes to make it work.
And that's why I coin myself as the 2 biggest things that are needed in a relationship, which is intimacy and communication. without both of those, it's going to be short lived.
Yeah, totally. So it can't just be about the sex.
Nope, it can't be about that. Can't be just about that.
So
it only goes so far.
Yeah, exactly. That gets old after a while. So before we wrap, how can people expect the sessions to go with you if they reach out to you? Do you do it by Skype or what?
I do it. I can do video. Most of mine are through phone calls. Most coaches do phone calls because anybody could just reach out to me and say, "Hey, do you want to work?" It's going to be hard to fly to LA for a session, unless it's Bono, of course.
Oh yeah.
But I do mostly phone calls. I'm totally comfortable with video chat. Sometimes it's better because then I get to read the person visually, which is nice.
Yeah.
But typically there's just kind of like a little Q&A before, just to make sure it's a good fit. There's a lot of awareness building once we start, and it's all goal oriented. It's what you want to achieve. It's what you want to build on. It's you have a goal that you're trying to get to, whether it's to not be single or to either learn how to communicate better, or maybe it's to even learn how to express yourself and learn how to be intimate, or learn how to trust, or learn how to be how to love, or there's a lot of different things that people like to work on. I would just say awareness is a big part, and results is an even bigger part. We're not, this isn't like a counseling office where you're just going to stop in for your daily gas for your car and get your fill and leave. It's not going to be like church where you get your energy and then you're set for the week. I'm trying to set the precursors for a very long-term thing. Yeah. And with that, you need equal accountability on the client's end. So come accountable. Come looking to make some change and have some goals in mind.
Yep. Be ready, people.
Yeah.
Be ready. Is it like 3-month packages, 6-month packages, or just ongoing?
Listen, the more committed you are, the better. Usually it's 3 or 6 months. You can do a year as well. If you think we're really going to work together hand in hand, that's even better. Yeah. But 3 and 6 months is usually a pretty good time to work on a goal.
Awesome. Daniel, it was such a pleasure to have you on. We should come up with some more like crazier topics regarding this, right? With dating and stuff. I think it'll be fun, and I would love to have you back. In the meantime, everybody out there listening, please go to the show notes and click on the links to connect to Daniel on his YouTube, Instagram, and his website if you want to get some coaching sessions yourself, and I encourage you to do so. Thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Have a great topic you'd like to hear discussed on an upcoming episode of Nothing Off Limits? Email us at ideas@ladyfoxentertainment.com. In the meantime, please subscribe, rate the show, and go to ladyfoxentertainment.com to sign up for our email list and to check out our resources page. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you next time.